And he sat under the terebinth tree, which is an Ophrah. No, that's not Oprah. Which is an Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. Oh, this is a great verse. Now, the name Gideon is the fifth judge of Israel. He ends up becoming the fifth judge. When he first appears on the scene, he doesn't look like judge quality. We'll get to that in a minute. The angel comes to him while he is busy. Have you noticed that the ones that the Lord typically calls, he calls them while they're doing something? When Elijah throws his mantle on Elisha, is Elisha sitting with his legs folded in the lotus position meditating, or is he out working? God calls Amos. He's out gathering sycamore fruit. The fishermen are fishing. The tax collectors are collecting. God calls busy people. If you want the Lord to use you, do something now. I get really exasperated when I meet Christians and they just aren't doing anything with their life and they say, I'm waiting on the Lord. Well, He's never going to call you. God calls busy people. He wants you to be doing something with what you have. Now, when we find Gideon here, he doesn't look like a brave man. He's hiding from the Midianites. He's clever, though. He is threshing wheat at a wine press. Why is he doing that? Because wheat and wine do not ripen at the same time. And he knows that if the Midianites, who are scattered all over the country, they're looking for anyone trying to harvest wheat and hide it. And he knows that the last place they're going to be looking for him, you usually look for someone threshing wheat on a threshing floor. They used to have these big flat floors where they'd crash the wheat out and then they'd winnow it in the wind, and that's where you do it. You go to the vineyard when the grapes are ripe. Grapes and wheat do not ripen at the same time, and he thought this would be a safe place for me to go. But there's a spiritual reason here. When God finds the great judge, the great deliverer, He's working with bread in a wine press. The Bible tells us that Christ, and Gideon is a type of Christ, that He makes a covenant with us. He did it by breaking bread and giving grape juice. Notice that God calls him in the context of the bread and the wine. He is threshing wheat in a wine press. That is extremely significant, friends. When God calls people, typically, they're not reading Tom Clancy. They're not reading Time and Newsweek. When God calls people, He often speaks to them through the Word. They are winnowing wheat in a wine press. What that means is they're threshing it. When you're studying the Bible, this is the bread of life, you are reading the Word of God in the context of the covenant. That's the wine. The bread in the context of the blood of Christ. And when you study the Word of God that way, that's when you hear the voice of God. That's when angels come with messages from God. And this is where we find Gideon. God is speaking to him in this context. This story is just filled with meaning.